Welcome back. AI and deepfakes have become increasingly prevalent online. However, with the election year approaching, many people are worried about the potential misuse of this technology to spread false information. To help voters distinguish fact and fiction, the nonprofit organization the News Literacy Project is taking action. Christina Veiga, Senior Director of Media Relations at News Literacy Project, joins me to discuss. Christina, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for paying attention to this issue.
Now, can you brief us on the overall threat of deepfakes and AI?
Yeah, so I want to acknowledge right off the bat that there's been a lot of hype around AI and deepfakes. People claiming it's going to save the world, AI, or that it might usher in our destruction. I want to kind of bring it down a little bit and acknowledge that there are potential benefits maybe to this technology, but also there are challenges, and that includes deepfakes. And this election season, we want people to be aware that there could be mis and disinformation created and spread by AI, and that includes deepfakes. But there are also ways that you can learn to spot it to make sure that you don't fall victim to being misled.
And we're definitely going to get into those. But I want to talk about, just this technology. How is it overall just being used to spread misinformation? What does it possibly look like while we're scrolling on our social media?
Sure. We've already seen some instances this election season of AI and deepfakes being used to spread mis and disinformation. That includes in New Hampshire some robocalls that sounded like Joe Biden encouraging voters to stay home. So we've already seen that this technology can be used to create really convincing sounding and looking fakes. So if you're scrolling through your social media feed, at first glance, it might not look like anything out of the ordinary. And so one of the biggest tips that we tell people is just to simply pause and to think about what you're looking at, what the purpose of it is, and maybe take one extra step to confirm whether it's true or not before you decide whether to believe it, and especially before you decide to share it with friends and family.
Now, you said something that I thought was so interesting, and you said that people were getting calls, which shows that it's not just online or just while we're scrolling. Can you tell us a little bit more about maybe the different mediums people are using to kind of spread deepfakes or AI?
This technology can be used to create images that look like photos. It can be used to create video that is very real looking and convincing. And yes, audio calls too. Outside of the election, we've seen this technology used to try to scam people out of money, making phone calls, claiming that a loved one is in danger and you need to send money to secure that, to get them out of jail or whatever it is. And so there are many different forms that this technology can take. And again, just pausing, asking yourself what the purpose of the information is, and taking some extra steps can really go a long way to keeping you safe.
Now, as you mentioned in the beginning, there's been a lot of hype around this, but misinformation efforts targeting political campaigns and elections aren't new, actually. Can you just explain maybe what were some ways people did this previously?
So before I came to the News Literacy Project, I was a reporter and I covered local politics. And people have lied about their opponents for a long time. Maybe before it looked like a mailer that came in your mailbox with some claims that were not true. Now it's easier and quicker than ever to create this kind of false information and to spread it at scale. And so we really want people to, again, just be aware because that is the first step to making sure that you don't fall victim to it.
Now, what I find so interesting about this is that we often have this idea that the people who are creating this are maybe people, just random people online or people in their basements or something. But really, it's a lot of people are doing this. Even reputable organizations that are kind of they have a great website. They have all these resources are actually contributing to this. Can you tell us a little bit more about that occurrence?
So we saw the campaign season kick off with a video from one of the major national parties that was entirely created by AI and showed kind of an America and the world in chaos. We saw more recently in Philadelphia, there was a sheriff whose campaign website included a bunch of headlines that actually turned out to be generated by ChatGPT and were not real. And so we see people already using this technology in the campaign season. And some of it is it's so new, maybe people aren't aware of its limitations, and so we want to make sure that people understand that too. A lot of people are experimenting with AI themselves. We want them to know that it's got a truth problem, that AI can be confidently wrong about things and spit out information and answers that are just totally made up. And so if you're using the technology yourself, you also need to be aware that it has limitations as a source.
Now, what are the long-term impacts AI could have on this year's election?
So AI can be used to spread all kinds of narratives about voting, who should vote, who shouldn't vote, who can vote. And so again, we want people to be aware that when you're looking for information this election season, especially about when, how, where to vote, that you need to be turning to credible sources. And that includes, your local election officials. If you're looking especially for information about the voting process, who's eligible, what you need to show up to vote, turn to those kinds of sources and make sure that you're double checking anything that you come across, especially on social media or from a source that you might not recognize, because that can have a real impact on the election.
Now, young people often have very low voter turnout, and many have expressed not even voting this year. How do you think AI could affect younger generations who are amongst those who spend the most time online?
So I want to be fair and acknowledge that people of all ages are struggling to find credible information these days. The News Literacy Project, we actually started off working in classrooms, and we still are doing that. That's a core part of our work. We believe that young people need to be taught how to navigate this information environment. We can't just assume that they're digital natives and somehow they intuitively know. They need to be taught. And so, yes, the young people need to be aware that as they're scrolling through TikTok, for example, there was a recent finding that as many as 1 in 5 videos recommended to them could contain misinformation. And so again, the first step is knowing there are people out there who might want to mislead you, especially around the elections and especially around the voting process. So make sure that you're asking yourselves questions about the sources of information that you're going to and consulting credible sources that follow journalistic standards like fact-checking, like disclosing their sources, especially when it comes to making decisions about how you're going to vote, when and where you need to vote. So young people, but people of all ages need to be aware and inform themselves.
Now, I think the most important question of the segment is, what are some signs that can show someone may be encountering AI or deepfake content?
So one of the things to know about mis and disinformation is it's oftentimes designed to trigger a really strong emotion in you. That can be something like fear, but it can also be something like hope or wonder. And so when you find yourself having a really strong reaction, that's a good sign to stop, to ask yourself, what's the purpose of this information? Is it meant to entertain me? Is it meant to inform me? Or is it trying to persuade me to do something? And once you've asked yourself those questions, you can take it a step further and ask, well, what is the source? What do I know about the source? Are they following journalistic practices, like disclosing their sources and citing where their information came from? Right now with AI and deepfakes, there are some limitations too, just visually. So just look at it and ask yourself, does this look right? And that can go a long way too to stopping yourself from falling for this.
And I also like that you mentioned that sometimes it just wants a reaction out of you, because there are people online who just want engagement with their content. So they'll say and put out anything just so that you click it or so that it gets maybe 1 million views. So I think that's also really important to note. Now, what is the News Literacy Project doing to ensure voters are making informed decisions?
So this election season, we have an information campaign just letting people know that yes, mis and disinformation abounds at this time of year, but there are ways that you can protect yourself. So we offer free resources online. We're doing all kinds of free training events. And so I really encourage folks to go to newslit.org/election, and you can find all kinds of infographics, free tools and quizzes, and we're doing online events. This year we're doing one in Spanish. It will have already passed by the time this airs, but people can watch the rerun on our website or on our YouTube channel. It's really important, especially that Spanish-speaking voters know that their there is mis and disinformation targeting their community specifically, and how to spot when that might be happening and where to go for credible information.
Actually, can you quickly just expand on that? Because I didn't even think about how it may target minorities and marginalized communities.
Yeah, so one thing about mis and disinformation, especially around the elections, is that it could be used to create divisions. And so there are often mis and disinformation campaigns targeted at specific communities. And so we want those communities to be armed with awareness and the skills that they need to spot that, avoid it, and to go find credible information this election season.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of discuss this, because I think there's so much more to learn about AI and deepfakes. And as you mentioned, so many people have these like polarizing views on it. Can you quickly just let us know, what do you think, or like what do you see in the future in regard to AI and deepfakes? Because you did mention that it's not all bad. So, what do you think?
So AI is getting better and better every day, and we see that people are trying to use it for positive reasons, in the medical field, for example. We think that the rise of AI and its continuing, it's evolving, really just makes it more important than ever for people to be news literate, which means that they can identify credible sources, they know where to turn for information, and they know how to spot the signs of mis and disinformation. Because again, it could also become easier than ever with these tools to spread that kind of false and misleading information.
And we have about a minute left. I want to talk about, I know that people say that this is moving faster than maybe the law can catch up to it. Do you think possibly in the future that there could be some laws targeting this?
So we've seen, I think, more than a dozen states now try to take action in all kinds of ways. Some states are concerned about the potential of AI to exacerbate biases. We've seen some of that with facial recognition technology. So some states are looking at that. There's also been talks about trying to regulate mis and disinformation, AI, as it relates to election information, requiring folks to disclose when it's being used, that sort of thing. The tech companies themselves are also trying to take steps with agreements that they opt into but are not necessarily binding. And that's all important. This is going to take many different approaches, including legislation, including the tech companies, and including all of us taking personal responsibility to learn how to recognize when information is credible and when it's not.
I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
To learn more about News Literacy Project and their efforts to stop misinformation for the upcoming election, please go to their website, www.newslit.org/election. Stay tuned, we have more open for you right after this.